Well, I'm here with my buddy Charles Bernstein. Hello, Charles.
Hey, Al.
Charles, this is odd to be saying in the second person, but I'm not talking to you. Charles, you are a friend of the Writers' House, a co-director and co-founder of PennSound, really important, eminent poet, and I share with you a lot of values, a lot of literary values, and one of them is we're both obsessed with the art and culture of the 1930s. And we are here now to talk about the lyrics, Yip Harburg's lyrics, and Al Jolson's singing, among other people, of this very famous Depression-era lyric called "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?" So I want to begin by asking you, this is a general question, why would a popular song, a song lyric, be of interest to fancy pants poets in the 21st century? In other words, why is this relevant to discussion about poetry?
Actually, the Library of America 2-volume anthology does the very unusual thing of including song lyrics in the collection. So when I was at Penn teaching, I always included song lyrics to teach. And I particularly love, as many people do, Yip Harburg. But I also like Ira
We know
Gershwin.
Yip from The Wizard of Oz. I think he wrote most of those songs.
He did. He wrote The Wizard of Oz with Harold Arlen. That was his most famous thing. That was a little bit after he wrote this. This was his breakthrough.
And Yip's politics?
Well, so the politics were socialists. Yip Harburg was born Isidore Hochberg in
Why give up a name,
1896
such a nice name as Hochberg?
to 1981. He lived to
Hochberg
1981.
means high mountain.
Yeah, Isidore, Izzy. So he became known as Yip, and the reason he became known as Yip was the Young People's Socialist League.
That's
Actually,
right.
his nickname is after the youth organization. Now,
Sometimes known as Yipsel or Ipsel later in the 60s.
So he became Yip. And
Isn't that interesting?
and it was a much more broadly popular, almost like a Bernie Sanders kind of populism, not the way we sometimes think of the Communist Party or socialism now. In the 30s, it was a genuinely, and this song is unusual for the many lyric writers who I love, who created American standards, many of whom were Jewish. This one became the kind of anthem of the Depression and the poverty that was created by the Depression. So it was an early hit of his that really crossed over, very different than Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
There were a lot of poems written by affiliates of the Communist Party, poets like Edwin Rolfe, who was actually a communist, who wrote about people who were reduced to panhandling, people who were on the streets, people who were begging for an opportunity to sit in a diner and have some eggs. There's a lot of that. And in ModPo, we have some of those poems. They are mostly, if I may, forgettable, but because they were attempts at social realism in like rhymed quatrains or something like that. This is different. This is operating in a genre that requires the rhyme, requires the meter, and yet it's about a very serious topic, which is, here's a person who's been brought low by the economics of the time and is asking people for a dime. What is so powerful about that for you?
I think this is different than most of the great American standards written by Harburg and the other composer lyricists, because it is an agitprop song, but it's not a social real agitprop, meaning it's meant to create outrage over a political issue that isn't argued in the poem, but is assumed that this is a terrible
propaganda.
thing. Yeah, agitprop, which we, of course, don't associate with poetry, but there's no reason why agitprop can't be as great a poem as any other kind of poem. And this one, of course, it's a song lyric. We should mention Jay Gorney wrote the music. Jay Gorney, Abraham Jacob Gornetsky, born in 1896 in Bialystok. So he's another Russian Jew, and he remembers and it's, of course, very important to think about the tune here. And it has this mournful tune, and I think that's the answer to your question about why this isn't a typical propagandistic or social realist poem, which normally is angry and shouts out.
And descriptive.
This is an elegy. This is mournful, and it's based on a Russian lullaby that he remembered when he was a child. So he brought this lullaby in, and then Yip Harburg wrote the songs. I want to mention one other thing about the Communist Party. I know that you write a lot about this. Yip Harburg was never a member of the Communist Party, but he was blacklisted from 1950 to 1962.
It's a lot of years.
Even though he wrote The Wizard of Oz.
Non-political, famous.
He didn't name names, and...
meaning he refused to accede to the demands of the congressional committees who were investigating people who'd been a member of the Communist Party maybe for 6 months in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And they already had the names, but the ritual of naming names, he refused to do the ritual and therefore could not earn an income for 12 years.
He also went to CCNY with Ira Gershwin, so that great moment of CCNY producing all these great artists and intellectuals.
City College of New York.
I mean, the black. He worked on Broadway during the Blacklist, but it's still
he also had royalties from the Wizard of Oz, I imagine.
Yeah, and now when you think about that, you can't imagine now that the political powers that be would blacklist people or make life difficult for people because of their politics. Can you?
I don't think so.
It's just,
I've never heard
fortunately, we're in a position where we can't even imagine such a thing, that a president or a political party would persecute people for their oppositional
Charles,
views.
that brings us to the particular recording that you've directed to us, that we have linked near this, the recording of this video, which is a reprise of a song that he hadn't sung in quite a while from the early 30s. In 1939, can you give us a little of the context of the politics?
All right. Well, so
of that moment?
the WPA is an enormously important government jobs program of employing writers and visual artists to work in the public spaces. So it employed, and many of the works that were done had a left or a socialist or a populist, left populist theme, though not all of them. And it also brought enormous amount of jobs into the arts sector, which of course was crucial for economically.
Can I add a footnote?
Yeah.
So the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, was huge, and it covered bridge building and agricultural enterprises. But the part of it that he's concerned
we're talking about here is the artist project.
Right, so that would be the Federal Writers Project, FWP.
Well, and in general,
and it was going to lose its funding in 1939.
Right. Yeah, and in general, the WPA itself as a public works program is significant, and one that, when there's high unemployment, is resisted by some and put forward by others. I actually I was the associate director of the CETA Artist Project.
In the 70s under Carter.
Right, under the Carter, and it was the only such program that was like the WPA. And we employed lots of artists working in the community, and then also I was involved with getting them jobs after that jobs program. It was very effective because a lot of those people did get jobs. But so it's fascinating with Jolson. There are two versions that you can listen to. The first version is, I think, a better version. It's more his studio recording. It's the famous one. The song is also done famously by Bing Crosby. I find Bing Crosby is harder to take, especially...
Can we say insipid?
Insipid, especially... I mean, he actually is a very talented musician, so you get the feeling for the song, but it doesn't have the kind of punch. And see, Jolson is always over the top, but it's often over things that now our current sensibilities would find disturbing or even offensive, sometimes just too sentimental. But here, over the top on people being unemployed, is very powerful, even though you're kind of like, you can't help laughing. But he's sort of laughing at it too. But the first version is better. What's great about the second version, so you have to stay to the end, is that he's saying that we've got to, save the WPA, and then he's got a whole lot of other actors and celebrity artists chiming in with short saying, I'm for this too, and to actually act on a particular piece of legislation. So it pushes back a little bit on the idea of Jolson, who appeared in blackface, and this has sort of almost now it's the primary thing people think about with Jolson, and blackface was reprehensible, and the particular blackface that he did was reprehensible. But at the same time, this was still a person with a lot of different kinds of allegiances, not the least of which is coming, as a Jewish person coming out of a religious context and becoming secular, as is, paradigmatic in the first talking film, The Jazz Singer, which is so important, where his father is a cantor, and then he goes into popular songs. So this connection between the jazz singer, the cantor singing, and this song is also very, very powerful. And it also would bring in Yip Harburg. So they're bringing a certain aspect of liturgical Jewish and Yiddishkeit culture into popular culture that's not in any way marked as that, but it's still that powerful Yiddishkeit yearning that makes this song so powerful, as well as, the incredible lyrics, which we can talk about a little bit. We're not going to talk more about the music, I don't think.
Yeah, well, I want to get to the lyrics in a second, but what you just said about the jazz singer, which is really a disruptive cultural thing that goes on within the immigrant community. You have the son of immigrants saying, respecting the liturgy, but also being interested in jazz and other popular forms. And that is like rejecting a certain kind of immigrant patriarchy in favor of accessibility, in favor of American forms, jazz. It's a really big moment, and narratively, the move that the character makes from cantorial to jazz singing is one of the most significant gestures of the early 20th century.
Right, and
about culture.
not confined to Gorny and Harburg alone. And there's a number of singer-songwriters who sort of invented the American standard or popular song.
So people can. Well, Gershwin is obviously one.
Irving Berlin. Who wrote both, is crucial. George and Ira Gershwin, Jerome Kern, and in a way the most incredible figure, Oscar Hammerstein II, as far as
when you get to Oscar Hammerstein, you get someone who broke in the late 30s doing anti-fascist and anti-Semitism work, worried about Europe, and basically, although he didn't get blacklisted, I'm not sure why, carried that politics forward all the way into the 50s.
Well, you have a wonderful chapter, which was revelatory to me, about a song that was cut from the movie of Sound of Music.
Yeah.
So Sound of Music is a little bit like The Wizard of Oz, and it's hard to imagine who these people were that were making that.
It's like a popular front. The Sound of Music's like a popular front movie made well after the fact.
Yeah. But I mean, and you can see this in South Pacific too, which has some very powerful political ideas. But when I was growing up in the 50s, the sound in the 60s, the Sound of Music and the South Pacific, which I knew, especially the sounds when I was, I knew it sort of by heart before I started to dislike it, and I had to dislike it before I could like it again because it was so saccharine. The way that it was packaged and put forward.
Well,
when you read your chapter, the lyric that's cut out of The Sound of Music, which is about one of the central things that The Sound of Music was about.
This is so interesting because
actually both South Pacific and both have very strong songs about intolerance, which are not the best known songs, or against racism.
This conversation belongs in ModPo Plus in the section on the 30s and leftist poetry in the 30s. However, if one wanted to, one could put it into week 8 with the language poets, talking to Charles Bernstein, who starts out as a nice Jewish boy interested in, pop lyrics of the, and kind of a fellow traveler in that sense, culturally, then goes into the, peak of, you go to Harvard and then you're interested in disruptive and disjunctive art. And so this kind of thing, some of your colleagues would think, why is Charles interested in this what do we call it, a sentimental tripe? But it's fundamental to you. And you're holding up your selected poems. And if you go far enough into the selected poems, you realize the influence of writing like this.
Yeah.
In fact, let me ask you to read. Let me ask you to read a poem. This is totally off script. Where's the poem about Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime? It's here somewhere.
Oh, that's right. There is one.
There is one. Do you remember where it is?
Do I remember where it is? Hey, buddy, do you remember? I'm your pal.
Yeah, how come you don't remember
Actually, I know the poem you're talking about, but I have to look at the index. I would say that in my work, there's an...
What's the title? I'll look it up while you're talking. Oh, I found it.
In my work, there's an enormous amount of deformations of American standard song lyrics and song lyrics in general, and nursery rhymes, but especially, I would say the 30s, but it isn't just the 30s and 40s. And in fact, World on Fire, which is partly in here, are all titles of standards, such as the one that here in ModPo you have made, better known than I could ever imagine it to be.
Like this.
Right, which is World on Fire. So that's another standard which I use as a title.
Would you read that for us?
Yes, all right. That's right. I completely. By the way, I did do my due diligence.
You
I
studied,
know this
but you
song,
forgot your own.
And I was, and with looking at, making notes, and I no memory of this at all. But Wherever Angels Go, and it's across the page from War Stories, which is another kind of, it's as far as the week 8 of ModPo. My interest is, of course, in all the kinds of odd things you're talking about, but it's in general interested in the multiplication of different kinds of forms, including vernacular and low forms, things that are not considered high culture, some high culture stuff, some in the middle, some crazy. So I'm interested in the mix of all of those things. But within that, the sort of popular culture song lyrics of the 30s, as well as popular culture in general, the television era, is fundamental. So wherever angels go, oh, hey, buddy, can you spare me a dime? I've been searching for you so long. Yeah, hey, sister, I ain't into no crime. Won't you show me the way to go home? Been a long time. Don't you know I've missed you so? Wherever angels go, I will take you there to glow. Oh, hey, buddy, will you spare me some time? I've been searching for you so long. There is no climb, makes no difference, no mind. Wherever angels go. Oh, hey, buddy, can you spare me a dime? I've been searching for you so long. Yeah, hey, sister, I ain't into no crime. Won't you show me the way to go home? Won't you show me the way to go home? Of course, this poem is very much more panhandling 1980s, put back onto the 30s. Right. And one of the interesting things about the Harburg and Gorney's is that it doesn't have that sense of people being menaced by the panhandle. That's not an issue. Right. Whereas for us, the subways in New York in the 70s and 80s, it was what what I was thinking of. So I was mapping this song onto,
as you tend to do.
Yeah, I wanted to also.
Can I just say, I love the matching of decades. You are the perfect 80s, 30s.
Yes, that's and Mr. Finelli is another example of that.
Another great example.
Because we're talking about this, I want to mention one other thing in terms of this, somebody you know well about, which is Mark Blitzstein. So Mark Blitzstein is a little less known.
Because he was truly doing left-wing theater.
Right. But nonetheless, he wrote a which you could look up, and I encourage you to listen to, Nickel Under My Foot, which is similar in its theme to this. And it's from The Cradle Will Rock, 1937, directed by Orson Welles. So this Cradle Will Rock.
That's part of that?
Well, he was part of that the theater, but this was and this was also kind of a left theater, right. And Orson Welles was central to it. That Cradle Will Rock, of which there was a movie made by I think Tim Robbins, really just maybe 20 years ago. That's in a way the fullest version of this, because mostly the singer-songwriters I like were not political in an explicit way, although you make the point that, of course, Oscar Hammerstein II was political.
Turns out.
But yeah, you have to look for it. And I love that too.
Yeah.
I love that too, because it's that's what, in a way, when we're thinking of this election and so on, it's to make something that's not so marked, that doesn't already wear its politics on its sleeve, but that if you listen to it and you get into it, you can hear it. That's a very, very, very powerful thing within popular culture. And I admire, these composers also rarely wrote about Jewishness, until Fiddler on the Roof, famously, but they did they invented aspects of Christian culture, like
Sound of Music is about Jewishness, sort of.
Right, that's right, later.
Mildly,
that's a little bit later.
Mildly.
That's a little bit later, right. But White Christmas by Irving Berlin, and this, they embraced certain aspects of the culture that they were in.
Yeah.
And that's also can be seen as a political thing. Not that they were trying to be manipulative, but they were trying to work within these broader conventions. My poem is as much as it's like some of these things, is completely unacceptable to a mainstream culture, and as well as to poetry culture, because poetry culture would say, "Oh, well, that's doggerel, and it's not a beautifully wrought poem, and it's not sufficiently formulaic to work as a pop song or even as a Broadway song." So it's actually not acceptable to either side, although I rather like that poem.
I have one more thing to say and get your response, but then we should look a little bit at the lyrics and wrap up, because we're...
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, but here's my first thought.
I thought we had this, it's 3 hours,
yes,
isn't
3
just
hours,
for this?
Yeah.
If we could do 3 hours
if we did
on this, which we could do.
We could do it, that's the problem with us. Nobody else cares about this stuff the way we do.
Yeah, but I mean, this song is worth as much attention, except it doesn't need it. So we're not going to do it.
Doesn't need it.
No, I mean, at a certain point, but I mean, I'm just saying it's enormously significant culturally and in every other way, this song.
Yeah. All right. Before we look at the lyrics, let me just raise one other issue. You brought it up. Okay. The embrace of doggerel, the willingness to count doggerel as part of the legacy that your generation of disjunction-minded poets could embrace, not all of them, some of them. Maybe you alone. But anyway, that doggerel could be reclaimed, as it turns out, not just a political gesture, but an undoing of the masking and the bearding of Jewishness.
Absolutely.
In a most intense political moment, the Popular Front, just before the Popular Front. That seems to me to be so important in thinking about contemporary poetry. Embrace doggerel as a political resistance. Comment, please.
Well, I mean, so it has the two elements. I mean, I love when you say masking and bearding. Because those are two wonderful things.
Bearding is a little ironic. Because,
I was going to say,
because the way not to be Jewish in the 30s was to shave the beard. But,
and also they all changed. They changed their names.
Remember the hateful anti-Semitic propaganda stuff that was going on in the 30s in Germany. You had these superimpositions of modern Jews in Germany who were deemed to be a threat, to be vermin, and they would superimpose big beards because really these are bearded, evil people.
Right, that's right, the beard.
So the bearding is actually quite...
Well, and also Isidor Hochberg and Abraham Jacob Gornetsky, I mean, they were right. They couldn't have existed at a popular level. And almost all of the comedians is another thing I'm really interested in of this generation. They almost all changed their names, and actually that was common at that time. And I'm not, as you well know, I'm not against bearding and masking. I'm all for it, and I love these people. I don't feel, they should have been some way else. I think that there's no way to be some. What I dislike is that when you think that you can ever be unbearded or unmasked. You can have one beard rather than another beard, and that's, of course, what makes me such a problematic person for a lot of people, because I don't believe there's any way not to have a beard or a mask.
And it's what you believe about poetry.
Right, and so
there's no such thing as a transparent speaker of a poem.
Yeah. So to bring back this, folk and some would say primitive or popular song, into, that's all often cited in high modernist works. It's not outside of that, but to sort of flip the coin and make the other stuff almost the doggerel. See, I think a certain amount of high poetic diction, which I like very much, something that sounds to somebody like Wordsworth or Shelley, to me, that's the doggerel in a poem. I mean, the citing of
there
this
you go.
high culture.
I knew we were going to get to that moment in this conversation.
So it flips. The idea, I'm always interested in flipping things back
right.
and forth.
Right. Yeah, Robert Frost comes out and says, you know, I speak like folks and up in New Hampshire or whatever, and so no high poetic diction. Something there is that doesn't love a wall.
And me, buddy, I took the road that you didn't even know was there, much less travel by.
and the misreading of that poem is
actually Robert Frost, especially the stuff around the First World War, just before, that is vernacular and was very radical at its time. Now it's become a kind of contained thing, but I would say Robert Frost is very radical in his time in terms of his use of idioms and so on.
All right, here we're going to wrap up.
All right.
We're going to wrap up, but I want to ask you about two phrases. First, I want us to riff on "I made it run," which is probably the most moving, powerful thing. Can we read that phrase? Made it run?
Yeah, I mean, it's like John Henry too. So this is the worker. I mean, this is what makes this a left song and even a socialist or communist song, is that it's about workers. It's about how workers and the proletariat, the working class, people in factories, create the wealth in the culture. Now, it doesn't say it like that. When you say something like that, it sounds like very, very close. But it's the way that it doesn't exactly say it that way, but you can't miss it. That's great about it. It's putting forward the most common and standard line about where value is created. You know, from Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto, and yet it puts it into something that's visceral and that you can see, which is that these people, and we're going to get to this later, with their hands, which are made invisible, to quote Erica Hunt's Invisible Hands, their hands are invisible. They're creating the wealth of the country, and they're being neglected. And by the way, this point is, when you're seeing this, the election will be decided, but not the politics we're talking about.
You're talking about 2024. This election.
The election in 2024, right? In November of 2024,
will be seen in 2030. We need to specify.
No, I'm saying that particular election will pass, but not just this election, but recent elections in which, and especially here in Pennsylvania, where white working class people don't feel like people recognize their contribution. And while in that case it's used to a very anti-socialist aim, nonetheless the visceralness of it is this sense of being robbed of something that you earned, your collective ownership of the culture. And politics will be more successful that can bring people like that in, because regardless of how they're going to vote and how they won't necessarily vote the same way I will, or the legitimacy of the concern of people just being written off in this society, used up and thrown away, is real. And it's actually cuts across every ethnicity, every group, and it certainly involves black people as well as the white working class. So
I would like to ask you about another phrase, then we're gonna have to wrap up. And that phrase is "now it's done," which rhymes with "I made it run," but it's even more powerful. Because what's done is the building of a railroad, the building of a tower, at times when the pump was primed and the economy was moving and people could work and have a wage. But once that stuff is done, and of course World War I, once it's done, then you are left because there's no safety net. This is really about economics.
Right. So this is FDR, and we have those safety nets now, unemployment insurance and so on.
And we did not have it when he wrote the song.
Right, recognizing the contribution of workers. But done is important in terms of industrialization and the Depression. So the backdrop of this is the economic collapse, not only in the United States, but and which has to do with what was going to happen with the massive industrialization of the railroads from the late 19th century, and also who profited from that mass industrialization, the building of the cities. Let me say three closing things then, which I think are important to. Well, I mean, you used to tell me I was building a dream, so this is before Martin Luther King. The people who built the skyscrapers, which is one allusion here, and built the railroads, built the infrastructure of the country, that was the dream of making this country great. And that's the American dream. And these people were being cut out of the American dream. And so I followed the mob. I just love the use of the word mob in this. It's in the second line. And it rhymes with, I was always there, right on the job, So you could count on me. Mob and job. Now, mob now is used in a negative way, but it's actually very much in line with a great 30s poet, or anyway, perhaps not great, but very significant and appealing 30s poet, Carl Sandburg, who in The People, Yes.
The People, Yes, 1936.
Right. The people, the mob. He says the people, the mob. So this is very, this isn't even coded, but mob and job and the people is a very specific call out. Also interested in the sarcasm. You hear it more in the early Jolson recording than in the late, when he's talking about World War I. So the people sacrificing their lives and not being respected for their sacrifice. I mean, we have that too in our current presidential campaign, where one of the candidates seems to think that people are suckers and losers because they fought for their country. And this has the opposite, that he feels that the speaker is saying, you're not recognizing the sacrifice I made once in khaki suits. And it's, we look swell, full of that Yankee doodly-dum. The second Jolson, he makes it almost sound like, it's not sarcastic, but it's deeply sarcastic. We look swell, full of that Yankee doodly-dum. It's like, well, you really wiped us out, took advantage of us, and we were puffed up. And then there's a section of this, which in the first is clear in the Jolson, which is actually Sprachstimme, which is something that you associate more with high modernism, where they're not singing. It's a monologue, and Jolson is crazy when he does it. Say, don't you? So it's more like my poem. In that point, the music drops away. Say, don't you remember? They call, and he's almost talking like a man, like a person on the street who's been prematurely released from a mental hospital. It's menacing, and I love that it turns menacing. In the final verse, it's also, there's an outrage and a sarcasm. Oh, say, don't you remember? They called me Al. It was Al all the time. Don't you remember? I'm your pal.
Yeah.
Buddy, so that turn to sarcasm and anger, buddy, can you spare a dime?
Yeah.
Buddy, you can spare a dime is not panhandling. It's, hey, you remember, I was there for you. Yeah. My country. I did all these things.
And so, your neglect made me crazy.
Yeah.
I have a final thought, and that is to think about this as either meta-poetic or meta-musical. The figure was part of the Million Boots slogging through hell, World War I in Europe. But I was the kid with the drum. So this was the artist. This kid was creating the percussion. So that is the same kid who's now older, who's writing and percussing through this song and is here to report to us. So
it's a beautiful moment.
And for the WPA and the Federal Writers Project to be kind of culminated in this political moment in 1939, trying to get senators to answer the question about whether the Pepper amendment was going to refund this project, and the person who represents it in this case on the radio
is the person with the drum.
It's the guy who created art
That's a very beautiful point, and it's actually, it goes back to your first thing, is why is this not like some of the other left proletariat writing and songs of the time, many of which I like, by the way. I'm not saying I don't like them, but this is a different thing. And, by the way, Sprachstimme, I should say, maybe not the word you hear every day. It's just in a musical number, an opera, where something is recited in a rhythmical way, but there's no musical accompaniment.
Such as you sometimes get in opera.
Yeah, you sometimes get an opera. Roland Barthes has the distinction between stadium and punctum in his book about photography, which is very simple to say. You look at the photograph, but then something in it really kind of pierces you and gets to you. And what is it that's the punctum that really? And this word, kid with a drum, that phrase, that's the punctum of the whole song. You've absolutely identified it because, first of all, it's not part of any ideological point that's being made. It isn't significant to the larger industrialization and unemployment. It has to do with almost the kid with the drum, who, and it just, it's art.
Yeah.
It's what the
kid
with the drum.
And
this is the kid with the drum. Yeah. This is the drum.
This is right here. This is, we're seeing. All right, I'm going to get the last word. I think the punctum, and this is funny, the punctum is Al.
Well, and not
Yeah,
Al
first of
Jolson
all,
or Al Filreis either.
Yeah,
It's in the
I mean,
original lyric.
It's the original lyric. So Al Jolson makes famous a poem, a song that was written about a guy named Al. Al is like the simplest thing.
guy, like
They
Joe,
called me
would-be
Al
Joe.
all the time. Al this, Al that. Al, climb up to the top of the skyscraper. Al, go to Europe. Al this, Al that. And now I'm Al. And you can call me Al if you want. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, it could be Joe too, but Al.
It could be Joe. I love Al. Charles Bernstein, thank you for talking about this. Al. And this is Al and Al signing off.